I'll be sharing a simple method to prepare a value study for guidance with a watercolor painting. Feel free to grab a screenshot if you'd like to use it for your own reference. I've chosen this landscape for today's project because it isn't overly complicated and the color palette is fairly limited, so I think it'll be perfect for those of us who are new at this, myself included. I've converted the image to grayscale so we can get a better sense of the values. Grab another screenshot now if you'd like. I printed out my reference photo and began looking for the lightest values, assigning a number 1 to those areas and a 0 to any spots that I wanted to leave untouched. I personally like leaving some of my paper white as I think it feels light and airy. My mid-range values were assigned number 2, and for the darkest values, number 3. We're going to be tackling this with a paint by numbers approach. As I bonk my head on the overhead camera, go ahead and sketch the landscape next. I'm personally not overly concerned with accuracy, as you can see, and I'm not including much detail in my sketch, just a basic layout to help me get a feel for where things should be. Because we're only focusing on values at this time, choose a single color for your value study, a paint color with good range so you can distinguish between multiple shades. I'm using my Winsor Newton's Paynes Gray, and I've added plenty of water to this first mix. For the initial wash, I'm painting wet on dry, covering all areas that I feel fall into the number 1 category, our lightest values. As you work, be aware of the zeros on your reference photo, as you'll want to leave these areas white. Unfortunately for me, the clouds are no longer noticeable on this grayscale version, so if you look closely, you'll see that I've just added some levitating zeros to my photo as a reminder to work a few clouds into my sky. If you haven't yet watched my last video, which was an intro to this paint by numbers approach, I'll link it in the description. In that video, I painted 4 different flowers with a single color each, and I thought it was a fun project for getting the hang of seeking out and painting different values. Plus, the flowers actually turned out pretty cool if you like the monochromatic look as much as I do. I think I'm just about done with layer number 1. So I'm scanning my paper now for the number 2s, looking for those mid-tone values. I'm also going to be preparing my paint mix for the second layer with more paint and less water than before. I realize there are more than just 3 different values in this photograph, but for simplicity's sake, I'm lumping the mids together. At first glance, it looks like the trees should fall into the 3rd category, doesn't it? But let's zoom in here and take a closer look. The majority of the larger tree, especially on the top right, is actually closer in value to the mountains than it is to the shadowed portion of the tree. So I'll be including the trees in with my mid-tone values, but I'll be adding the dark shadowed areas when we move on to the number 3s shortly. This photo reminds me of a field that my friends and I used to cut through on our way to a pond. Well, until we were chased by a herd of cattle with a bull leading the charge. That was the last time we took the shortcut. Who else remembers the 80s, yelling to your parents that you're going out to play and then disappearing until dinner time? No cell phones back then, of course. Things have changed. I'd say most of the lines in this field would fall into the mid-range category as well, so I'm just brushing those in here and there, trying to follow the picture for the most part. I'm so curious to see how things are going to come together in the next painting when we actually add our colors. I'm running low on my paint mix here, so I did have to prep some more, and I added a little bit too much color, but that's actually fine because I know that a good portion of this outline of the road will be covered by the darker paint anyway. And I've noticed that Paynes Gray is one of those colors that dries so much lighter than when you initially put it on. I'm just going to throw in kind of a mound of grass here in the bottom right corner. My paintbrush appears to be thinking here. It's not sure if we're done with the 2s. Maybe, maybe not. Yep, we're done with the 2s. It's always funny when I watch my recordings afterwards and there are so many weird things that I didn't even notice myself doing at the time. I should save them all for a blooper reel, although I'm afraid it would mostly be me trying to wash my paintbrush in my coffee cups. I honestly don't know how it happens, even when my cup is nowhere near my paints. There must be some kind of magnetic pull. I've mixed that final dark color now with even more paint and less water. We're looking for everything that falls under the category number 3. Let's add the darkest values, the shadows, the areas of the photograph that the sun doesn't touch. I'm zooming in slightly with our reference picture to get a better look at the shadows. Notice how the left sides of the trees are darker? And see where the darkest values are on the road, hidden under the long grass? So it's obvious that our light source, the sun, is coming from the right. And almost halfway up the road, there are fine horizontal lines where it appears we might be seeing shadows cast by the long grass. My next video will be a continuation of this one. In that video, I'll be preparing my colors, my blues, greens, yellows, in various values, of course. And I'll be testing this paint by number method once again as we take a crack at the full color landscape shown at the beginning. Okay, at this point I'm just finishing up the final details. There were a few areas that I missed on that last step. And of course I'll throw in some dark blades of grass in the foreground. Okay, I think that gives us enough to at least guide us. And I'd say we are done with our landscape value study. Here's another look at that original photo, the color version of this scene. So, what do you think? Are we ready? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.